When we look at historical records, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you picture dusty archives, ledgers, dates etched in stone. It feels like looking at an X-ray.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You see the rigid, undeniable bones of what happened,
Mm.
right? And you point to it and say, well, that's the truth.
Right, because you're either documented in the ledger or you're just, entirely lost to time.
Exactly.
It leaves very little room for the actual lived human experience, just the cold, hard facts.
Which is why stepping into the world of historical fiction is such a disorienting but really fascinating shift.
It totally changes the lens.
Right. That X-ray machine just gets turned off. We aren't just looking at the bones anymore, because what happens when an author takes cold, rigid facts from a ledger and forces them to breathe?
It gets really interesting.
It does. So today we are unpacking excerpts from this ebook called Memories of by Carol M Mottershead.
Yeah, which is a spin-off from her previous work, the Elixir Chronicles.
Right, but the foundation of this specific book is just wild. The author takes exactly 2 actual historical records from June and July of 1640.
And these are regarding a real man, right?
Yeah.
John Punch.
Yes, the real John Punch. And from those 2 isolated dates, she builds this entire massive fictional universe around him.
It's quite an undertaking.
So if you've ever wondered how authors fill in those massive gaping holes of history to create living, breathing worlds, well, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, we're really going to see how fiction uses those historical gaps to explore colonial survival and the intense class structures of the 17th century.
And just the absolute extremes we push ourselves to for love.
Definitely. The stakes in this environment are inherently dramatic, mostly because the reality of the era was just incredibly hostile.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are dropping right into the year 1654.
Right in the thick of it.
Yeah, on Gwynn's Island in Virginia. And there is a deadly, totally unidentified disease just completely ravaging the island.
People are dropping left and right.
Exactly. The water is contaminated. And we start right at the emotional core of the text. It's John Punch's desperate, frantic attempt to save his dying wife, Anne.
She's basically on her deathbed at this point.
She is. And John is sitting there totally helpless, and he's just remembering how they first met.
Which is such a smart narrative choice. It grounds this massive historical context there in a really deeply intimate moment.
Yeah, the contrast is stark.
The stakes are immediately life or death, but the emotional anchor is this tender memory, He remembers finding her passed out and severely sunburnt from, hanging the washi on the plantation.
He literally just scoops her up. And what follows is this fantastic scene in the plantation kitchen with Marianne.
Ah, Marianne.
Yeah, the pragmatic housekeeper who just immediately takes charge. She's scolding him, telling him to go get milk and honey from the wagon.
Right, she doesn't panic. She just gets to work.
And together they make this poultice. It's oatmeal, honey, milk, and an infusion of willow bark.
See, that poultice is a brilliant historical detail. It really establishes the reality of colonial life.
Because you couldn't just run to the pharmacy.
Exactly. You relied on this fusion of generational European knowledge and indigenous remedies. Marianne actually explicitly mentions that the willow bark tisane is an old Indian recipe for pain.
Wow.
And biologically, willow bark contains salicin.
Which is like aspirin, right?
Exactly. It's the chemical precursor to modern aspirin. So they are actually treating her severe sunburn with a highly effective, localized painkiller and anti-inflammatory.
That's amazing. And this flashback really establishes John and Anne's dynamic, too, because reading this, you realize it's basically your classic opposites attract rom-com trope.
Oh, totally.
But, dropped into the brutal, unforgiving reality of the 1600s. You have John, who the author writes as this super charismatic, theatrical guy.
Because he grew up in a Commedia dell'arte acting troupe back in England.
Right. Which is how he ended up willingly signing a 7-year indenture just for the adventure of traveling.
He's a performer at heart.
He is. There's this memory of him doing a dance to impress Anne at a harvest festival. He calls himself Jim Crow, shuffling around like a bird trying to grab food from a bucket.
Just getting big laughs from everyone.
Yeah. And then you have Anne, who is this incredibly strict, devout Catholic.
Her faith is pretty much the defining pillar of her worldview.
Yeah.
She previously refused to be physically intimate with John because they couldn't be legally married by a Jesuit priest.
She has that line, right? I'm a good girl, I am.
Yes. She operates under an immense terror of living in mortal sin, which was a very real, paralyzing fear for devout colonists at the time.
So you have the theatrical, larger-than-life actor and the strict, devout woman trying to forge a connection.
But the reality of their situation just constantly interrupts the romance.
They can't just fall in love and go on dates. They have to survive sunburns, exhausting indentured labor, and now this mysterious plague.
Right, and the European colonial doctor is just totally useless against this disease.
He's just filling the room with crushed garlic vapors, hoping it helps Anne breathe.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is how the author uses the failure of colonial medicine to really escalate the narrative.
Because the garlic isn't doing anything.
Exactly. The doctor's garlic vapors do nothing, which forces John to literally leave the confines of the plantation.
Right.
It highlights the severe limitations of European science at the time and pushes John to seek outside indigenous help. This failure of the establishment is the catalyst that sets him on a literal hero's journey across a very dangerous landscape.
And it's a journey that he decides to take on a sturdy Narragansett pacer horse named Major.
Yes, Major.
I love the logic behind this detail. Master Hugh, the plantation owner, he tells John to take his fastest horse, Greased Lightning.
A great name for a horse, by the way.
Right. But John deliberately ignores him and goes for the reliable, sure-footed Major.
Because he knows the terrain.
Exactly. He knows the rugged wilderness and the muddy tidal rivers are going to be treacherous, and pure speed won't help if the horse breaks a leg in the dark.
He'll move.
So he rides north to the Potomac River to find a legendary Moyoni medicine woman.
Moving from the domestic space of the plantation into the raw, untamed wilderness of Virginia, it completely shifts the tone of the story.
It really does.
When John arrives at the Powhatan Indian camp, the author paints a very precarious geopolitical picture of the tentative peace between the colonists and the Native Americans.
The tension is just palpable. He meets Chief Nectawayne, who is described wearing this imposing king headdress covered in jewels and shells.
Very intimidating.
And John has to undergo this elaborate pipe-smoking ceremony. He is desperately anxious to just grab the medicine and ride back to his dying wife, but he has to sit in a circle in complete silence and smoke.
He ends up coughing, right?
Yes, he actually ends up coughing out a massive cloud of smoke, which makes the warriors laugh, and it finally breaks the ice.
That physical reaction really underscores his absolute vulnerability in that moment.
Oh, yeah.
The laughter diffuses the tension, but it reminds us that he is entirely at their mercy. He's a trespasser in their domain. And this is the environment where he finally meets Pernell, the medicine woman.
She is such a fascinating character. She is described as having a pale, moon-like face and a thick French accent.
And she's waiting for him.
Yeah, she tells John she's been expecting him. She hands him the potion and gives him this incredibly cryptic warning to beware of crossing shallow water in the dark because it could rise quickly.
Right.
But I have to push back on this character design a bit. Isn't Pernell a little too much of a mystical intervention?
How do you mean?
Well, in a story rooted in the gritty historical realism of poultices and colonial survival, she feels like a magical plot device.
Yeah.
Does her whole Vision Quest vibe actually fit the grounded reality the author has built?
Well, from a purely realistic standpoint, she does operate almost as a deus ex machina.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a sudden, seemingly magical solution to an impossible problem.
Yeah.
But if we analyze her narrative function, Pernell is crucial.
Okay. Why?
The author uses her to bridge the gap between the European settlers and the Native American tribes. She embodies the merging of cultures.
Ah, I see. A French woman living among the Powhatan.
Exactly. Providing a botanical cure that European doctors just couldn't comprehend. It emphasizes that survival in this harsh new world required abandoning rigid colonial structures and blending collective knowledge.
Okay, so she's less of a literal historical figure and more of a thematic bridge.
Right.
So John grabs this cure and begins the frantic race back to Gwynn's Island. But his desperation to get back to Anne isn't just about the illness.
No, there's a lot more history there.
Right. It's rooted in the fact that they have been fighting for their right to be a family for 14 years. Which brings us to the defining flashback of the story.
This is where the historical records come in.
Yes. As John battles exhaustion on the ride back, he reflects on a pivotal event from 1640. This event answers why John is still an indentured servant bound to Master Hugh, while Anne is nearing the end of her contract.
It's the core conflict of his life.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The author takes a major real-world historical event and completely reframes it.
Yeah, this is probably the largest creative liberty taken in the text.
Break that down for us.
Historically, the real John Punch ran away with 2 European servants in 1640. When they were caught, the 2 European men received a few extra years on their indentures, but John Punch was sentenced to lifelong servitude.
Wow.
It's a foundational moment in historical records. It marks a permanent legal shift in how servitude was codified in the colonies.
But in Memories of, the author reframes this entirely. In this fictional universe, John didn't run away to escape Master Hugh.
No, not at all.
He left the plantation with good intentions. He was desperately trying to travel to Maryland to find Father Copley, a Jesuit priest, so he could finally get baptized and legally marry Anne, easing her religious guilt.
Right.
And two other servants, James and Victor, just happened to tag along, and they flat out refused to go back when John warned them it was a bad idea.
So it looks like a coordinated escape.
Exactly. When they were all caught, it was perceived by the authorities as a coordinated runaway attempt. I have to challenge this narrative choice, though.
Yeah.
By turning a grounded historical reality into a tragic misunderstanding where John just wanted to find a priest, doesn't that risk turning a serious historical event into a convenient, romantic plot device?
That's a fair critique.
I mean, we lose the harsh structural reality of the era in favor of a Shakespearean tragedy.
This raises an important question about the mechanics of historical fiction. When you adapt real court records, how much do you adhere to the bleakness of the original context versus the specific emotional arc you're building for a novel?
Right. Where's the line?
By reframing the motivation, the author creates a highly specific emotional engine for the characters. In the book, Governor Leonard Calvert gives James and Victor extra years, but gives John life servitude specifically because he is not a Christian.
Okay.
And crucially, Master Hugh, the plantation owner, actually tries to save John in court, but fails.
Which creates a massive rift in their friendship because John feels betrayed that Hugh didn't trust his motives in the first place.
Precisely. The author uses Hugh's immense guilt over the sentencing to create a really complex, codependent dynamic between the master and the servant.
Yeah, Hugh is just desperate to make amends for failing John.
Right. He realizes that when Anne's indenture ends, she'll get her freedom dues, her 50 acres of land, but John will still be tied to Hugh for life.
So Hugh exploits a legal loophole.
Exactly. He decides to assign John to work Anne's land on the island, technically keeping his legal ownership while allowing John and Anne to live together as a family.
It is a wild legal workaround born of pure guilt.
Completely.
And while John is desperately writing back with this medicine, trying to save Anne so they can actually live on that land together, the author weaves in a soap opera level subplot.
Oh, this part is wild.
Yeah, involving Master Hugh and his second wife, Elizabeth. They are the ones keeping vigil over Anne back at the plantation.
The author layers these secrets masterfully to contrast the different social classes. We get a flashback revealing that 20 years ago, Hugh and Elizabeth shared one passionate night in Maryland.
And she got pregnant.
She got pregnant, but flatly refused to marry the older man her father had arranged for her.
Right.
And because she refused, she became a social outcast, branded with the label of a thornback.
A thornback. That is such a vivid, brutal term.
He really is.
It implies someone far past a spinster, like comparing an unmarried woman to a marine ray covered in sharp spines.
Yeah, it was a very real, very harsh societal label at the time. So Elizabeth raised their son, Jack, in absolute secret.
Just hiding him away.
Exactly. And
Yep.
Jack eventually ran away years ago when he discovered he was considered illegitimate after Elizabeth's father screamed it at him during an argument over an inheritance.
Wow.
So Hugh has spent the last 4 years married to Elizabeth, completely unaware that he has a 24-year-old son out there in the world.
And this is where the story turns into a full Shakespearean comedy of errors.
Oh, big time.
Because guess who John Punch bumps into on his frantic ride back? A traveling trader named Jack.
What are the odds?
Right. They share a campfire, they bond, and Jack actually helps John cross a treacherous tidal river at slack tide, narrowly avoiding the rising water Parinel warned about.
The cryptic warning pays off.
Yes. And Jack is so moved by John's sheer desperation to save his mother figure, Anne, that Jack and his wife Jane decide to follow John back to the plantation.
So everyone is heading to the same place.
Exactly. Everyone is converging on this one island, harboring these massive, life-altering secrets. It takes a dying woman and a frantic horse ride to put all the players on the exact same stage.
The structural timing of this convergence is very, very deliberate. The author uses Jack's sudden return to deeply humanize Hugh and Elizabeth.
Because they've been the masters this whole time.
Right. Throughout the story, we see John and Anne fighting from the bottom of the social ladder for the legitimacy of their family. By bringing Jack back, the author levels the playing field.
Ah, I see that.
Hugh and Elizabeth, the wealthy masters of the plantation, are suddenly forced to confront the hidden, messy, illegitimate reality of their own family structure.
That's a great point.
It strips away the class divide and reveals them all as flawed humans, just desperate to keep their loved ones close.
Which brings us to the climax. And this climax is pure, unadulterated chaos.
It's so intense.
John arrives at the house, pushes his way through the crowd, kneels by Anne's bed, reaches for the cure, and then realizes he left the medicine bag in Jack's wagon outside.
It is a truly agonizing moment.
Yeah.
Just a lapse in memory brought on by sheer physical and mental exhaustion after days of writing.
So he sprints back outside, stops Jack's wagon, frantically digs into the saddlebag, and reaches his hand in blindly in the dark.
And we know what happens next.
And he gets bitten by a two-headed snake.
It is a shocking pivot.
A two-headed snake that he had killed at his campsite days ago and stuffed in his bag because he thought it would be a cool curiosity to show his grandson.
I mean, the author ratchets the tension up to an absurd level here.
Bonkers level. Seriously. The medical reality of the 1650s is suddenly applied to a snake bite. The doctor has to slice John's hand open, physically squeeze the blood out, and aggressively apply ammonia.
Ugh.
And because they are just out of options, Hugh suggests they give John some of the Native American potion as well.
So John manages to give Anne a few drops of the potion. She starts to swallow, and then John completely collapses from the snake venom.
It's just one thing after another. So what does this all mean? We have a grim deathbed vigil interrupted by a two-headed snake bite, and the melodrama just explodes.
Because miraculously, it works.
It works. The potion works. Anne recovers. The ammonia in the potion saved John. And while all this physical chaos is happening, Jack sees Elizabeth leaving the room and realizes she is his mother.
The reunion scene between Elizabeth and Jack provides a massive emotional release. All her fears of him hating her just melt away.
Yeah, and then she introduces Jack to Hugh.
And Hugh discovers he has a grown son. And his very first instinct, hilariously, is to try and punch him.
Right, because he thought Jack was a stranger inappropriately hugging his wife.
But once the truth comes out, he joyously accepts him. The melodrama operates as a pressure valve for all the historical tension built up over the novel.
It all happens so fast. Once Anne is awake and John is recovered, John proposes to her again. Reverend John, who is Hugh's other son, baptizes John Punch right there in the freezing seawater.
Beautiful scene.
They have a massive double wedding. John and Anne finally getting married in the eyes of God, and Hugh and Elizabeth renewing their vows with their son present.
And the puppet show.
Yes. The entire story culminates in John putting on a commedia dell'arte puppet show with a Mr. Punch puppet fighting a crocodile, entertaining the whole plantation. The tonal whiplash from the deadly plague to a joyous puppet show is incredible.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer wildness of the ending reveals the author's ultimate goal.
How so?
Well, we discussed how she reframed the historical records of 1640, right? Despite the incredibly harsh, often fatal realities of 1650s Virginia, Mottershead intentionally wanted to give these characters a moment of pure, unadulterated grace.
Yeah.
The melodrama, the secret sons, the sudden cures, the double weddings that serves to completely subvert the traditionally grim genre of colonial historical fiction.
So you see the puppet show as the ultimate symbol of that subversion.
Absolutely. The puppet show acts as a direct metaphor for the author herself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just as John pulls the strings of his wooden puppets to entertain his family and rewrite the tragedies of his life into comedy, the author is pulling the strings of history.
Right.
She's taking the two stark historical records of John Punch's condemnation and using her authorial power to grant him the joyful, loving life he was historically denied.
Yeah.
It is an act of narrative redemption. The dry facts are manipulated to serve a deeper emotional truth about human resilience.
That is a beautiful way to interpret such a wild finale. It takes this story from being just a dramatic colonial soap opera and turns it into a commentary on why we write fiction in the first place.
Definitely.
Memories of takes two dry dates from a court ledger in 1640 and spins them into a rich, vibrant tapestry of faith, endurance, two-headed snakes, and double weddings. It reminds us that looking beyond the dry facts of history is sometimes the only way to imagine the human heartbeat underneath.
It really forces us to acknowledge that the historical record is inherently incomplete.
Yeah.
Like the ledgers and court documents rarely capture the laughter, the inside jokes, the desperate rides through the night, or the quiet moments of resilience that actually define a life.
Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over today. If our historical records only capture our worst days, our trials, our court sentences, our debts, what responsibility do we have to imagine the unrecorded days of joy, the love, and the puppet shows that make up a whole human life?
It's a great point.
Think about what your own historical record might look like centuries from now, sitting in some dusty digital archive. You'll see the taxes, the forms, the rigid bones of your timeline. But what vital human truths, what beating heart would that X-ray leave out?
A profound question to end on.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep questioning the records.